Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Poe, and today I'm here to do week 27 of my 2022 reads. This week I read 4 books, most of which really worked for me, and a couple of which were new releases. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. So first I finished The Riverbank by Kij Johnson, illustrated by Kathleen Jennings. So I picked this up because recently Becca at ReadBecca, who I'll link below, did a video, which I'll also link below, recommending some books to some of her booktube friends. And for me, she recommended The Dream Quest of Vellitt by Kij Johnson, which was an excellent recommendation, but I actually have already read that a couple of years ago and I loved it, and I've been meaning since then to pick up something else by Kij Johnson. And in the same video, Becca also talked about how much she loved The Riverbank, and so I thought, well, let me pick that book up. I loved the other book so much, and I really trust Becca's taste. So I picked this book up, and it was spectacular. So this is set in the world of The Wind in the Willows, which is like a classic novel written at the beginning of the 20th century that has like Toad and Badger and Mole and a couple of other characters. And this takes that exact same world and story, but kind of continues it, adds in a couple of female characters, another mole and a rabbit, and we kind of see what their coming to the riverbank does to the dynamics in the community. And then of course Toad gets into quite a few troublesome encounters, and there's all of these antics, and this book was just such a delight to read. I love that style of early 20th century kind of almost comedy of errors, ridiculous characters, but also that pastoral feel. It is just such a comfort to read. I think that Kij Johnson really encapsulated that feel of the original while also kind of adding an updated take to it. Also, this book has little illustrations throughout, just throughout the chapters, little illustrations of the characters. At the beginning of the chapters, an illustration of sort of what's to come, and they were really lovely illustrations. I loved those so much. So this was just a pure delight to read. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and thank you very much to Becca for recommending that I pick up something else by Kij Johnson. Next, I read Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe. So this is another book with great illustrations. This is a graphic novel. I think it was a webtoons and then kind of collected and put out as a first volume that I'd heard quite a few people reading and enjoying. It's eligible for a Hugo Award this year. I had originally not planned on picking this book up because it is a Persephone's and Hades retelling, and I just wasn't sure that that was really going to be my cup of tea. But hearing all of the positive reviews and just looking at the artwork on the cover, I was like, let me at least give it a try. And the artwork is just as stunning on the inside as it is on the cover. It has these gorgeous colors, just really vivid blues and pinks and purples. I absolutely loved the colors, and I loved the line work. I loved the drawings and how that was done. They are a little kind of sexy at times. Like, this story has a lot of like short skimpy dresses, things like that. And the storyline itself is really kind of what you would expect for a modern take on a Persephone and Hades retelling. But that was the part that I wasn't sure I was gonna like, and it turns out that that wasn't a part that I liked. So even though I thought the artwork was really amazing, I loved the artwork, I just wasn't a fan of the story. This is very much kind of like a 50 Shades of Grey almost feel to it. It has a lot of soap opera drama type of things with, which makes total sense. It's Greek mythology, right? Greek mythology is inherently like a soap opera. You have all of these characters who are betraying one another, who are jealous, who are acting out, all these sorts of things. And that's in this book. So just wasn't my style of story, even though I did really love the artwork. So for me, it was 3 out of 5 stars, but if you like that kind of more dramatic thing, I bet this would work for you. Next, I read True Biz by Sara Nović. This is a 2022 release that I'd seen an excellent review for by Rogan at Rogan Shannon. I will link their channel and their review below. And that really convinced me that I wanted to give this book a shot. So this is a story, it's a contemporary told from a couple of different perspectives, written by a deaf author about a bunch of different characters at a deaf school. So there is the headmistress, there's a couple of the students, and sometimes we get perspectives of things like parents and things like that. And it's telling about some events that happen where some students go missing. And we're really getting a lot of information about so many different characters, but there are three primary characters. So the headmistress, a teenage girl, and a teenage boy. And each of them has very different experiences within kind of the deaf community. So the headmistress is Coda, so a child of deaf adults. So she is hearing, but she grew up in a deaf household, so she's bilingual, and she runs this deaf school. And then we have the teenage girl who grew up in a hearing family, has a cochlear implant so that she can hear, except that it doesn't work very well. She's really struggled. She's very language deprived, and she arrives at the school and has to learn how to sign, but finally kind of finds her community. And then the teenage boy is somebody who is deaf, who's grown up in a deaf family with generations of deafness in the family, so they're really comfortable with signing, very much embedded in the community. And so through their perspectives, as well as some of the other characters, we get all of these different facets of the deaf community, a lot of the politics, a lot of the issues that affect them, as well as the storyline of specifically what's going on with these kids, what's going on with this school. And so there's a little bit of a mystery kind of going on where you're trying to figure out like what's going to happen. There's also just so much connection to each of the struggles that all of them are going through. They have quite a few. And there's little inserts throughout the book that show different kind of signs that are common, so little language lessons, as well as talk about the history and kind of culture of the deaf community. Really, really informative stuff. And each of those inserts is directly related to the chapter that is before or after it. And so it kind of provides a little bit of that context. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to add in. This story was very, very gripping, and I just loved the characters, and I loved the way it played out, and I loved all of those issues that it explored. I did think that at times it was a little obvious that almost, you know, every character and every plot line sort of was done to show some aspect of deaf community. So it was like seeing the seams of the story, if that makes sense, rather than it being more seamless. But even so, I thought that this was just such an enjoyable read, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I read Seeking Fortune Elsewhere by Sindya Bhanoo. This is a 2022 release short story collection that I heard about from Mercedes at MercysBookishMusings, who I will link below. This is a kind of literary fiction contemporary short story collection that centers around a bunch of South Indian characters, many of whom are kind of connected to each other in one way or another. And it focuses on a lot of their issues, both the characters who are in India, but also a lot of the characters are immigrants to the US, and it just kind of is a slice of their lives looking at whatever it is they're dealing with. And I loved the way that this represented their experiences as well as what their issues were. And I saw so much in this that reminded me of my husband Sush, because he is Tamil, which is like a culture and language in South India, and most of the characters in this are Tamil as well. And so I just saw so many of the experiences that he's gone through, or his friends or his family have gone through. It felt very, very true to life, very true to all of those experiences. And, you know, the food and the language and the culture and everything in there, in the stories really represents that, but also just the issues, like what is it that people are dealing with things like people who live in India, but they're growing older and their kids are in the US, and like trying to figure out, well, do I go visit them? Do they visit me? Do they come back to India to live with me? Or do I go live with them in the country that they've gone to be in? And like all those questions. Or people who have come to the US and then had kids in the US, but then their kids are just totally separated from Indian culture, these sorts of things. So lots of really great stuff in there about that immigrant experience and about just the Tamil experience in general. Also, I think that the theming of this collection is really well done. It feels very, very, very cohesive. The title of the book, Seeking Fortune Elsewhere, I think really represents what this collection is about. All of these characters have tried to pursue a better life in some way, but often there's that feeling of not being content with where they are, or of their dreams not having quite panned out the way that they wanted them to. So it's very cohesive as a collection. I do think though that maybe just because I don't read as much literary fiction, that cohesiveness as a collection is also a little depressing, because like all of the stories end with this very unsatisfying ending where they're just not reaching what they wanted to reach, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But for me, maybe as more of a genre reader, I'm not used to stories ending with such a lack of kind of a happy ending or a conclusion, if that makes any sense. But even so, I thought these stories were really, really solid, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so those are all of the books that I have read this week. If you guys have read any of these, if you're interested in reading them, if you have any thoughts, or if you want to share with me what you've read this week, especially if you think something would appeal to me, I'd love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.